Hi, my name is Christy, also known as Sullen Girl, and I'm the author of the blog Speaking Out About Self-Injury on HealthyPlace.com. Today I want to talk about self-injury and adults. And as some of you know, I am in recovery from self-injury, but I started self-injuring about 14 years ago. And the point of this blog is to dispel some of the myths and misconceptions surrounding people who self-injure, as well as kind of address some of the stigma surrounding self-injurers. And before I started making this blog today, I asked some of my YouTube subscribers and blog readers what they thought was the biggest misconception about people who self-injure. And overwhelmingly, people responded that the media and people in general tend to think that self-injury only exists in teenagers and young women. And I guess the reason for that is because most documented cases of self-injury do occur in teenage girls. The reason being is because, females are more apt to ask for help and they're more kind of open with their emotions. Whereas, males in general tend to be more quiet and statistically, males have a harder time asking for help than females. So while it's seen as kind of a female thing to do, self-injury actually exists a lot in males as well. And it doesn't just exist in teenagers. And while most people who self-injure did start self-injuring at an earlier age, it is not unheard of for people in their middle age to start self-injuring. Because at the end of the day, self-injury is an unhealthy coping mechanism, just like drugs, alcohol, and eating disorders. And at any time, someone can start coping with things in an unhealthy way. It's also important to note that as adults, self-injures can be notoriously harder to treat than teenagers. And that is because a lot of people who started self-injuring did so when they were younger. So once that behavior becomes ingrained into your life, it's a harder thing to break. And it's harder to relearn something that you've been doing for so long. And a lot of people who self-injure rely on self-injury as their coping mechanism to deal with stress, anxiety, fear, and emotional problems. And if they've been doing it a long time, it can be really hard to relearn how to deal with life without the unhealthy coping mechanisms. Some of the most common ways to treat self-injury in adults is medication, and that can be used if you have an underlying mental illness in addition to your self-injury, such as depression, borderline personality disorder, or some other form of psychosis. The next thing is group therapy, and that's used a lot in adults who self-injure because you can bounce ideas off each other and you can relearn ways to cope with life. And talking really helps in adults because adults are notoriously harder to treat because they don't want to be told what to do. And so when you're in group therapy, it can really help just to talk things out and relearn how to cope with life in healthy ways. So in conclusion, it's not just teenagers who self-injure. People can self-injure into adulthood if they've never gotten proper treatment. And in being harder to treat in adults, it can be harder for people to let go of those bad coping mechanisms. So contrary to what the media might want you to think, people of all ages and both genders can and do self-injure, but there is hope and there is treatment to be found for everyone. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next week.